actually not included in this kind of report card that the United States produced for everyone else. But as of a few years, the United States recognized how important it was for us to also evaluate how this crime is looking here in the US. And we can tell you that without having so many key partners, the community, service providers, state agency, law enforcement, it isn't something that is going to go away. This is why it is important that every opportunity that we have, we share, and that now that you are actually empowered with this information, that you actually take it to your own groups, social groups, and any other groups that you belong to inform them about what you have learned and to let them know that it is happening here in Tallahassee. A lot of people think, oh, this isn't happening in small cities like us. What do we have here in Tallahassee? We only have practically government employees, we have students, but we have seen many cases. The Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center is working directly with victims and survivors on a daily basis.
In fact, Vanya, as we go to this next slide, I think I should share with everybody that we now have a bigger caseload than we've ever had for the 6 years of our existence. And it is really, it's becoming more and more apparent that the impact of COVID, the economic crises that we're seeing more and more. But anyway, I interrupt. Let me get this slide up for you.
So when we talk about human trafficking, we really talk about 3 different elements that really indicate that human trafficking is taking place. We talk about action, means, and the purpose. And so anything that involves this really constitutes human trafficking. So the person, that is recruiting a victim, a person who is harboring, the person who is moving, although moving does not need to take place for it to be considered human trafficking, or obtaining a person. So what is it? How do they do it? They do it either by force, fraud, or coercion. And I can tell you that based on a lot of the interviews that we have conducted, force, like you see in certain movies, like the movie Taken, for example, it's not necessarily the case. People think that they are going to have a better life, a better opportunity. And that is how a lot of people are induced into this kind of crime. Coercion is another. So it's a lot of psychological coercion that is taking place with the kinds of cases that we have seen, people that we have interviewed. And what is it exactly that they are obtained to do, that they are induced to do? Is either voluntary servitude, debt bondage, slavery, and sex trafficking. We see, as I mentioned earlier, we see both in the state of Florida, as Robin mentioned earlier, is the 3rd in the United States for this kind of crime, and it continues to grow. As people are educated in this area, they identify this, they see red flags. Those are some that we are going to be discussing with you this afternoon. And then people start reporting. There is a human trafficking hotline that we'll share with you towards the end of this presentation, letting you know that if you see any suspicious activity, that you can actually report the crime or anything that you see anonymously. And it's better to actually report it than to have that inside of you thinking, I know there was something wrong there. But we'll discuss that with you later. So some people think that that trafficking and smuggling are the same thing, and they're very different. If we think about human trafficking, it is a crime against a person. If we think about smuggling, it's a crime against the border. Trafficking is involuntary, even though many times People know what kind of work that they are going to do, but they are not necessarily agreeing to be trafficked. I'll give you an example. The kinds of cases, some of the kinds of cases that we had here in Tallahassee, some of our clients actually knew what kind of work they were going to do, but they never agreed to the conditions in which they had to work. In any way, shape, or form. So smuggling, someone pays a coyote, for example, a smuggler, to bring them across the border. So it's voluntary. Trafficking, a lot of exploitation based, and smuggling is mainly transportation, bringing someone across. For trafficking, there needs to be no movement whatsoever. Somebody can be recruited here in Tallahassee and can be trafficked here in Tallahassee. They don't need to cross any particular border. Smuggling, we're looking at international border, whether it be the southern border or the northern border, equally both. And they look at human trafficking as a person, using a person as a commodity. When we are looking at vulnerability, well, anybody who has a vulnerability can actually be a victim of human trafficking. We're looking at many push factors, the promise of a better life, poverty, economic insecurity, looking at the economic ways of improving life, people that don't have housing. And we've seen that, during natural disasters, for example, and many others, for just to list one. Immigration, we have seen that immigration status is held against people and exploited and threatened because of their immigration status. Substance abuse is a big one. We have seen also here locally in Tallahassee that even parents exploit their own children. We've seen cases in which parents traffic their own kids because they have this a substance abuse, and they need to find a way to support that addiction that they have. Prior abuse, neglect. The LGBTQI plus community also is it's not supported many times by our communities, by their own families, and so they find themselves in a situation in which they could end up in a trafficking situation, depression, mental illness. We have seen all of those. And then of course we have, from the trafficker's perspective, we have traffickers finding different ways, using whatever they can. They are on social media. Traffickers look like any other person. There isn't a way that say, that is actually a human trafficker. No, they can be within the person's circle of friends. They can be within the person's family. We really don't know. One of the very first cases that we were involved in, a 70-plus-year-old grandmother was actually the mastermind behind this whole scheme of human trafficking that took place all around Florida and all the way up to the Carolinas. So they use different tactics, they use different threats, they use different ways of control. Many times it's not force, many times it's not physical abuse. For the most part, a lot of it is psychological, and that is very hard to identify and see how someone is being manipulated in a psychological way.
And one of the things that we really treasure about these times that we can be with you is that it's the opportunity to really start to dispel some myths, to inform people about what's going on. Actually in the chat, and I can't see the chat, but I'd like to ask a quick question of all of you. Is anything that Vanya already talked about or that we spoke about so far been a surprise? Is there anything that maybe in your mind that you said, oh, I didn't know that? If you want to just say yes or no, or if you want to say, I didn't know that, whatever it was, that there was more labor trafficking than sex trafficking. Those are really important points for us to see. Anything coming in the chat, Vanya?
Yes, Elder Brooks actually is asking, which part of the state would you say is most affected?
Mm.
Everywhere. Big cities, small cities, rural areas. We have seen that human trafficking actually affects all parts of the state.
Yes, and really because it's this first point here, because it is so hidden, it's been a frustration of us sometimes at Stack, because when you look at applying for federal grants or you want to have awareness raised in your area, sometimes people think it only happens in Orlando and Tampa, Atlanta, Jacksonville, but I promise you it is going on here. And we're also seeing that's frustrating because we don't see that the victims can always access help. Especially during the pandemic, we found that many nonprofits closed. It certainly was harder for us. We also saw that that traffickers are really quite artful at isolating victims from help. It is one of their tactics of control, much like in domestic violence situations. We also know that this is a crime, and actually I should tell you, it's a crime of crimes. You probably saw that I'm a lawyer. I'm not going to go into all the details about all the crimes, but feel free to ask legal questions if you have them. But it's a crime of crimes in that trafficking involves so many other crimes. Yeah, I just trained some bank officials the other day. Money laundering, identity theft, stealing people's, forcing them to open credit cards, bank accounts. There's all sorts of things that happen in the financial world. Plus, in order to control somebody, they may, as Vanya said, all those threats. They also commit other kinds of physical crimes, batteries, sexual batteries, aggravated assault, etc. So you can see that what happens with trafficking is that there's a whole series of crimes that really involve and are included in trafficking, including the actual crime of forced labor. And what we find with traffickers is that they're very artful at putting other people out the front. So they put the victims out front. The victims are the ones actually performing the labor. They might be the ones actually trying to, make deposits in banks, say, because if there's something wrong, that person is going to get caught, not the trafficker. So that's where the low risk part comes in. And we're also grateful to do these presentations because really this is something that a mental health expert said, which is he was seeing how all the myths and all the things that people think about trafficking that maybe Hollywood and all these SVU shows have given us kind of really creates a world of misconceptions. So that's what we're here today to kind of dispel those misconceptions.
And before we go on to the true and false, we do have questions. It's one of the questions is asking, is the rich also affected? Does education play a role?
Does education play a role? Well, I'll tell you, Vanya. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've heard about cases of nurses from the Philippines who are trafficked. So, what is the vulnerability? That one slide with the push and pull. You saw that there could be economic circumstances. That vulnerability might be they lack education, ability to speak, say, English if they're brought to this country. But on the other hand, sometimes people who are educated are also trafficked. It depends.
I definitely agree. It's all about any vulnerability that a trafficker can exploit. One of the other questions is, what can we do to help in the cost for human trafficking? Should we call the abuse registry or the police?
Yeah,
And
let's
that
hold that.
really depends.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, let's hold that to the end. We're going to have some information for you about who to call. So that's a really good question.
Yeah. And the last question on the chat is, who gets involved in helping the cause? Police, FBI. We're also going to address all of that. Robin, I don't know if you want to talk about it
Yeah, really
a
good
little bit
question.
now locally.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the Big Bend Coalition maybe toward the end, but the answer is yes, plus all of those people. As I mentioned just the other day, again, training 150 plus people at Capital City Bank makes me realize, oh my gosh, people who are in businesses have an important role to play. So everybody really has a role. That's a short answer, don't you think?
Yes, everyone, but also it really depends on the situation, right? If someone is in imminent danger, then definitely 911. If you just see something that is suspicious, but you don't know exactly what it is, but you have this gut feeling that, oh, there's just something not right. The human trafficking hotline is there, and you can definitely, as I mentioned to you before, you can make that phone call anonymously if you wish to do that. There is also, if someone is not in imminent danger, you can always call the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center here locally, and we can definitely direct you to other resources. We definitely have the list of people locally that are investigating these kinds of cases, and we have those points of contacts and connections. So asking you about whether things are true or false. If someone is trafficked, it is their choice and their fault. What would you say on the chat box? I don't see any answers coming in.
Yeah,
Well,
is it true
that's
or false?
a false. It says false. Yes, I see false. And I would absolutely agree. Great. Everyone is typing in at the same time. Wonderful. Yes, totally agree. It is false. Traffickers make victims commit crimes. Do you think that is true or false? So a victim of human trafficking, yes, absolutely, it is true, because a victim of human trafficking can actually be forced to commit different crimes, whether it be stealing something or committing many things against the law. And some people actually end up being identified as victims of human trafficking because they have committed other crimes that their traffickers have made them commit.
And
Only immigrants are labor trafficked. What would you say? Absolutely false. And we talked a little bit about that, right? We have seen cases in which both adult U.S. citizens and minor U.S. citizens have been labor trafficked. And traffickers are easy to spot. What do you think? Is that true? False. Absolutely. As I was telling you, anybody can be family members, people who are older, people who are young. There isn't really a way to say, oh, this is definitely a trafficker. Robin, would you like to move
yeah,
on?
and one of the things that that we want to show you is on this slide, right, Vanya? Who is a trafficker?
Yes.
Who is not a trafficker?
Yeah. So what do you think? Is there anyone in particular here that you would think, oh, no, this definitely, you know, isn't a trafficker in this particular picture? What does everyone think? Someone says the cheerleader might not be the trafficker. Others say all can be. They all look like traffickers. And when you say they all look like traffickers, well, anybody. There isn't really a particular something that identifies anyone who is a trafficker. And in this case, they have been traffickers in different cases, all of them, including the cheerleader.
Exactly. And really what traffickers do sometimes is as they victimize somebody like a cheerleader, for example, they might have victimized her. And then in order for her to either rise up in the trafficking organization or avoid the worst parts of the abuse, she might actually become a recruiter for that trafficker. And, you know, we go through these cases as well, and we say, well, is she really free? You know, was she doing this? Was she being forced to commit this crime? It just goes to show that she might have been forced, and maybe she wasn't a trafficker. So that was, you know, a very good observation. But in this particular case, she actually was criminally prosecuted. Some of these other cases, like this man trafficked other young men using drugs in particular. This older man, this kind of like, I don't know, old crusty character. He also was a trafficker, sex trafficker, where he used drugs to get people under his control. And the woman up here is somebody who trafficked her child. As Vanya said, the example of parental trafficking, of people who are trafficking their own children, in some cases to support a drug habit.
Yeah.
So
I can
again,
tell you that the very first time, sorry,
no, go
Robin.
ahead.
I can tell you that the very first time that I was introduced to this concept, that it was people who are very close sometimes, was one of the cases here in Tallahassee, that I interviewed the young woman, and she didn't want to give a lot of details. Later we found out that it was her cousin who was, as Robin said, she was a victim herself, and then in order to get out of that situation, she decided to recruit her cousin and have her cousin trafficked in the same industry that she was being forced to work in. And at this point, she was a recruiter, not a quote unquote victim, because she was still being manipulated. But now she was finding other ways so that she wouldn't have to do that kind of work.
Exactly. Because again, we're focusing on youth, and youth and gangs are quite common. Really wanted to share with you this information about gang activity. So even in our small community, there are literally hundreds of gangs in our area, which shocked me the first time I heard it. And I know if any of you are from other parts of the state or in other parts of the state now, I'm sure you know that gang activity is there, and there can be just a range of criminal activity that takes place there. But just like with other kinds of trafficking, gangs find this to be a highly lucrative part of an organized crime, because when you traffic somebody, you can sell that person over and over and over again, as opposed to when they sell drugs, right? Once you sell drugs, the act of selling that gets rid of that drug, can't use it again, that's gone. Know in particular that young girls face a lot of harm that comes to them if they join a gang, often forced into the sex trade, and raped by multiple gang members. And so these are also situations where, as Vanya described, the recruitment process, that you have youth then recruiting other youth. So here are another set of true and false questions, which I'll ask this time, Vanya, and see what everybody says in the
Yeah,
chat.
absolutely.
So, is it true that only women and girls are trafficked, or even sex trafficked? Is that true or false?
We're getting false in the chat.
Exactly. We know men and boys. Sometimes, often too, Hollywood portrays victims of sex trafficking as only girls, and we know that boys are also sex trafficked. Traffickers are most often strangers to the victim. Do you think that's true or false?
We're getting false as well.
This is a smart group, I think. Yeah, so you're really paying attention. Yeah, exactly. They're well known to the victim often. In fact, the traffickers often befriend or are related to, as Vanya was saying. But there's a process of grooming that takes place, which we've got a video we're about to show you on that. There's more sex trafficking than labor trafficking. I think we've already talked about that. So everybody knows that that's false, although it's kind of tricky with the reporting that we see. And let's ask this, Vanya, can traffickers find you on social media? Is that true or false? Traffickers can find you on social media.
Everyone is agreeing.
Absolutely. Just like every other kind of form of commerce, if you will. And really, if you think about trafficking, what traffickers are doing is they're commodifying a human being. They are turning that human being into a commodity that they sell. And where are so many things being sold now? Online and social media.
Yeah.
And
Before we go on, Robin, there is
yeah.
just one question that I think before we forget, because this is very important. Someone is asking, are victim recruiters judged similarly, meaning as the traffickers? What does rehabilitation look like for them?
Hmm.
And
Right.
that really depends on each case, right? And also it depends on the how much they are working with law enforcement. I guess also how much they are working to prosecute these cases. It's on a case by case, I believe. Wouldn't you say, Robin?
Yeah, I would say case by case, but I would also say that generally, I mean, our rule that we follow is that if a victim is being forced, coerced, psychologically coerced in any way to commit a crime, in other words, committing that crime without free will, then that person is a victim. And also know that we don't have time to go through a lot of laws, but we do have a law in Florida called the expungement law, which allows for somebody who has been convicted or arrested for a crime while they were being trafficked to have that crime expunged or removed from their record. And what that goes to show is that, and we just had a big program like this as part of our coalition's a quarterly meeting. It goes to show that very often arrests do take place of people that shouldn't be arrested. So if someone is being forced to do any crime while they are under the control of a trafficker, the fact that that can be wiped off their records is an indication that wasn't a crime to begin with because they didn't have free will. So anyway, so that is a very good question. And what I think eventually people should start to realize is that if a person like that cheerleader was being forced to, maybe the trafficker was saying, do this or else, or I'll kill your baby, or I'll take some other action, that could be a sign of coercion, and that really that person should not even be arrested. But if they are, they might get that expunged.
Absolutely.
So Vanya, this is one, by the way. Vanya was telling me many stories about she's got kids, and I thought, Vanya, when you were talking about your daughter on social media, this was kind of an interesting one slide.
Oh,
I thought you'd have some
absolutely.
insights on this one.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. Social media is huge now. You see little kids knowing how to use that phone and flip through different ways. A lot of what many of us growing up didn't have. And you turn around and there is this other social media platform. My kids keep saying that Facebook is like for old people. That's the social media that I use. But also, Facebook has been used in many cases to recruit victims. Now, what do we see that we didn't necessarily didn't have before is that a lot of young people now immediately when they face some kind of challenge or difficulty are posting, and they're constantly posting where they are, how their day is going, and the predators are everywhere. My with my children, they are aware that they have certain privacy, but when it comes to being able to monitor their social media and their phones, they actually know that I can pick up their phone and check it anytime I want to. When it comes, because I guess the kind of work that I have been doing and what I have seen, my 10-year-old uses this platform that supposedly is only for kids. And then this happened probably, I don't know, like a month or so ago. She came running into the kitchen and says, Mom, this person was asking me my full name, and this person was asking me where I lived. And I immediately blocked him because I hear you talking about this all the time. It is really important that we train our youth that social media is open to everyone, that whatever posting, even when you have a private profile, that there are ways that um, predators can actually access the information, and that they need to be extremely careful as to the kind of information that they share there, whether it is their location, where they live, their full name, because there are people out there always recruiting. I mean, we have, as you see the logos down at the bottom of this slide, there These are only a few of the applications of the social media platforms that are out there, and kids are always updated on what is new, and they know so much more than we as adults know, how to use all of these different platforms. That is why we have to educate them and let them know of the risks out there.
And strictly monitor them, even on games like Fortnite, any place where any youth can be direct message DM'd. Know that those are also places where traffickers lurk, and they will make, they'll give them a little bit of money, they'll give them tokens, whatever, so they can keep playing and start to befriend them. In fact, the video we'd like to show you now is one where you've got a situation where parents and a child are at home. And I will tell you, when you watch this video, I'd love to hear your reactions afterwards, because often we hear parents say, oh, I'm so afraid my child is going to be, snatched off the street and thrown into a van in the parking lot of Publix or something. But I want you to take a look at this video and see what you think in terms of where the danger really lies. So this particular video is one that that we saw as part of one of the trainings we do. The Department of Children and Families showed it to a group, and I thought it was particularly powerful. What did you all think of this video? Any reactions? You can put it in the chat. You might want to unmute as well.
Yeah, I think that this was one of the things that I was totally blown away by, and where I thought that it definitely needed to be shared with not just one person, but to everyone that I knew. How can you be sitting right there and your daughter, your son is doing what we just saw, and no one was able to pick up on it because it's not being monitored. So our eyes are, as parents, our eyes are just focusing something else and not taking control of what we need to take care of right in our home. right beside us, not even in another room per se, but right beside us. And, this is a challenge and it needs to be addressed. And the more information we can get on it, I think it's going to be the better for us to address it per se.
Absolutely. Thank you. It looks like someone else would like to speak, sir. Anyone else like to comment?
There are comments on the chat too.
I wanted to make a comment that from that video, it was clear that the parents weren't seeing it. But I think one of the dilemma that parents face is not invading on their privacy. And so much is taught to them at school about privacy, 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 that you're treading this very, very thin line of monitoring them and showing respect. So what is there to really help parents to be able to be conscious of this and to take the lead without, at the same time, without invading their space and disrespecting them?
I can tell you what I have negotiated with my children, being in this field and knowing what is out there, and having one who is going to be a teen in a couple of years, and my other one who is 16. They hear me talking about this all the time. It's just education. Education is key. Letting them know that you trust them to make good judgment, but also letting them know your concerns. And it's not that you don't trust them, is that you know that there is also so much out there in the world, and that you have as a parent have lived and experienced so much more, and that you know that they are very smart, and that by you talking to them about the risks, that they are going to make the right choices. But as a parent, that you feel the duty to actually let them know that this is happening, and let them know also that when it comes to this kind of privacy, really there is no privacy. Who's paying for that phone, and who bought the tablet, and who bought that computer, and who is paying for the internet? I know that as kids growing into teens and adulthood, that we have to trust them, but we also have to be very careful on walking that fine line, and just let them know how much you care, and that this is actually happening, is very real.
Yes, and yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Dawn, you can continue. I was just going to say something.
Go ahead. Yes, please.
Okay. I was thinking that in the level of communication, it's very important that we allow our kids to feel comfortable communicating with us. I have a grandson, and nothing can happen to him when he walks through these doors in the evening that is disturbing to him, that he won't say to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is very important, just to have that relationship where your child, I'm not saying that he's immune from being it, because he's on computer and tablet every day. But if something comes up, the first thing he does is like, Grandma, look at this. Or if he doesn't get through to me at the same time, he'll call his mom. But it is very important that we allow that level of communication with our kids, that they feel free to say something to you and not being rushed, not being judged.
Yes, very, very important. I would agree with you 100%. In fact, part of what I think, Vanya, what struck me about your story as well was your daughter came to you and said, here's this going on, this is what I did. And and actually the points that we have up on the slide now are ways to get, Vanya, to what you were talking before, is educating parents and grandparents to talk to their kids about, here are some tips. And by the way, Elder Brooks will be sending you, this is a final PowerPoint, and I'll be sending this to you later so you can share this if you'd like, because we do have a lot of information here and phone numbers. So if you wanted to share some of these points, but here are quite a few. I think we've pretty much talked about all these. Maybe I can move on to the next slide, Vanya, and see what else is there. And
thank you. I think we have addressed them.
Yeah. Would you like anyone like to to say anything else about these? Here's some other tips. One of the other things that we find too, this last point, it's really a realistic one. It's a scary one to think about, especially if you think about your child running away. But when I think about, although I think maybe once or twice I wanted to run away when I was a kid, I don't know, I never did. But a lot of children have that feeling of just, I've got to run away. You know, and that's a very scary thing. One of the things also that we find is that many of the children who are preyed upon and befriended, just like in that video, it showed you just a snippet of kind of the grooming process that goes on in trafficking. But sometimes that can take place over a longer period of time, and a child might feel they can run away. But know that there are resources out there, including the runaway switchboard, where they can help a child get to safety. So it's not like giving them the, you know, use your you know, judgment on what's appropriate. But this might be something that if you do have a friend whose child is running away, you know, it's good to know that that child would have some information in their back pocket. If they needed to get help, they could find it.
Absolutely. And with that in mind, Robin, there is a question in the chat box and in the chat box asking, what is the percentage of runaways who are trafficked? I don't know that we necessarily have a number that we can pinpoint and tell you. However, we can tell you that a child who runs away and does not have the right resources, doesn't have the information, and is out there, is vulnerable, and within minutes can be preyed upon.
Exactly. And what we see, sometimes children are running away from abusive situations in their own home. And so their vulnerability is that they have been victims of physical or child sexual abuse in the home, and they're actually running away from that violence, that vulnerability, you know, that harm that's happened to a child is then also, it seems like traffickers have a sixth sense that they can detect all kinds of that, you know, vulnerabilities of and harm that someone has suffered, and then they are their best friends until they demand some kind of payback.
Yeah. And I think that this, with the 10 things not to do on social networking, I think that we have been talking a lot about this. So I don't know that we need to go point by point, because there's other information that we want to share with you. And this PowerPoint is going to be made available to you as well. Right, Robin?
Absolutely.
So how about if we go into this instead, taking action?
Yeah, let's talk about taking action. So if we had more time, what I'll do, and I can give you this link as well, but it's really exciting here locally that the FSU College of Law has a video that talks about what you can do as a consumer. Now you might say, wait a minute, we've just been talking about sex trafficking and labor trafficking of children, and what are you talking about? What we do a lot at STAC is we want to help you and help the community to look upstream, if you will, to understand that everybody has a role. And those of us who are consuming food, services, any kind of like restaurants, any kind of hospitality, you have a choice into where you spend your dollars. So one of the things that the College of Law did was they highlighted how children are labor trafficked in the cocoa industry and producing chocolate. They have produced a video, which again, I'll share with you, but these two websites here help you figure out what you can do as a consumer to be smarter, to make sure what you're buying and what you're consuming and where you're spending your dollars doesn't go to an industry that is supporting human trafficking, that is exploiting and enslaving people in the production of whatever that thing is. So the slaveryfootprint.org is a website where you could go and literally look at by what kind of car you have, what kind of phone you have, what kind of clothes you're wearing, other sorts of things, how many, literally how many trafficked people are working for you.
I'll give you an action item that it's going to, that you can start implementing right away, even tonight, if you're going to the grocery store. 80% of the tomatoes for the entire country are produced here in Florida. There are very nice programs that I love Publix, don't get me wrong. They have nice programs in place. One of the programs that they will not join is that they will not join a program called the Fair Food Program that monitors that no one is abused in farms and that pay fair wages to our farm workers here in Florida. They will not join that. Wendy's is another one that will not join. There are many different ones that have joined. If you looked up Google Fair Food Program, you can see a list of all the corporations that have joined. Publix and Wendy's are ones that have not joined. So just to give you one that you could start implementing right away. And I will not buy my tomatoes from Publix, and I will not eat anything at Wendy's because I don't want to support that their efforts not joining actually something that they do have control over.
And actually, it's the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, right, Vanya, who have this great program. Yes. And also, at one point, yes, they were boycotting Taco Bell and Yum Foods. And guess what? They have signed on and they are now part of the Fair Food Program. So there are all kinds of examples. This website, everything that you might want to buy at a grocery store, at Target, whatever, there are examples of where you can buy slavery-free, trafficking-free goods and services. So one of the things that we want to share with you too is that we mentioned this at the beginning, but it truly does take a village. So if you want to do something, please reach out, go to our website, which we'll give you that at the end, but it's surviveandthriveadvocacy.org. We have tons of information, resources, and things that you can take advantage of. There are groups around town. We can connect you or someone you might know who you might have a concern to get help. We are able to also connect you to other places, like you might want to call the hotline, or you could even call us and we could help connect you to national resources. I think one of the questions earlier might have mentioned this, but just to kind of reiterate that if you do suspect that a child or a vulnerable adult, and that's anybody who is over the age of 18 but who can't take care of themselves, kind of carry out the duties of daily living. If you find that someone is being exploited, abused, neglected in that way, that is a mandatory call to the state child abuse hotline, that 800-96 abuse. So this is just to be a reminder that we all are mandatory reporters, and that if you do, after seeing today, maybe a neighbor, and I'll tell you, we've had neighbors call the hotline because it's not always a teacher or a counselor. And really, trust me, since COVID happened, a lot of children that weren't in front of, camp counselors, teachers, they were very isolated. That was really a very fertile place for traffickers to go after kids. So it was important for neighbors and anyone to know that you calling the hotline is really important. These are resources we wanted to share with you as well. Of course, as Vanya said, 911 if it's an emergency, but this is the National Human Trafficking Hotline number and their website. The website's at the top. If you go on there, it's a 24/7 multilingual line that will connect you to resources. It can be a tip line as well. I think last week, Vanya, we got 2 calls from the hotline, which is we're getting more and more calls. STAC is a member, the organization that we are part of is a member of the National Human Trafficking Hotline Referral Network. There's your number again for DCF. And also the resource center, that 888-37-37-888. That's how you can remember it. 3 8s at the end and 2 37s in the middle. Oh, and Vanya, I'm so sorry I didn't have your contact info on here too. But if you wouldn't mind putting it in the chat, that would be good. I think you're on mute. But I apologize.
I'm typing it as we're ending the.
Okay, this is how you can get in touch with us. And really, here we are right now at 6:01, Elder Brooks. We wanted to get to the program over the hour and then leave time for questions. If anyone would like questions, we are happy to take them. And again, we want to thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you this evening and really be of any service to you as possible. So let us know.
I want to take this opportunity to thank you and Vania for, just coming in. I reached out and you guys just jumped on it and asked me when. And it took a while for us to set it up, but you guys came in. And the education, I think, is so important. And it's again, I felt that it wasn't just for the children, but for everyone to know. And we will see if there is ever a time that we will be able to, call you, back again to, if you have more information and you'd like to share. I think that, we should try to arrange that.
Someone asked if we do relocation assistance, and let me just, I say, yes, we do. What we do is we do an intake and we meet with other service providers, for example. And what we do is try to tailor whatever services are required to that person. You can imagine if you think about who could be trafficked, an infant could be trafficked. And a man from India who is in his 60s could be trafficked, as they did with men from India who were very skilled labor welders in a case. So we are not probably ever going to have a shelter for trafficking victims, but we will work hard to find the appropriate care and service that somebody who is trafficked needs. It just varies very greatly.
Again, if there's any questions, if not, we will, thank the presenters. Are there any question anyone would like to throw anything else out?
I don't want to throw any question, Brother Brooks. I just want to say thanks. Add my thanks to your thanks. I think the one who just spoke is the one I spoke to the other day. I think she sent.
Yes, that's me. Good to see you, Pastor.
Yeah. I identify you by your voice. But we really much appreciate your spending the time with us today. I hope it will be possible for you to come back, because the information you have there is invaluable, and we believe that the entire church can benefit from what you have shared. And not only that, because you would have enlightened us, we'll be in a better position also to inform others. I think the greatest demonstration of appreciation for what you've done for us, Trafficking, would be to use that information to help others. So I want to thank you again, both of you, for taking the time out to share with us. That's what I want to say.
Thank you for coordinating everything. It's always nice to share and to think with a community, invite the community on how we can educate others and work on this together. It's the responsibility of a whole community, not just a few people.
All right, thank you again. I guess we'll close. I don't think we have anyone else. We'll close with a prayer, if you guys don't mind. Oh, Father and our God, we are just so thankful for this opportunity this day. We were able to come and hear more about human trafficking. You created us all, Father God, and we need to learn more and more to love each other, instead of use each other. We pray, dear Lord, that you will continue to be with the presenters in the field of their endeavors, that they can help others, help more and more each and every day that they go out and do their business. Pray, dear Lord, that everyone that heard these news, that they will learn how best to, as parents per se, be able to monitor their children more. As always, everything begins in the home. So help them, Father God, to be more enlightened by what they've learned here today. We ask for a blessing upon each and every one. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you all. Thank you, Vania, and we thank you, Robin. And hopefully we will be able to see you guys again.
Will do.
Absolutely.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Let me see.
Elder Brooks, thank you so much for having this presentation. I think is extremely important.
I think so myself. You know, again, I don't know. There's so many things that there's a book that I read. I used while I was in college. It's called Disposable People, and it's so relevant even now. And this is a few years ago, but
yeah,
we are right around us. People are being used, and we don't even know. We don't have the eyesight. We don't have the wisdom to know that this person right beside us, this person sitting on the bus with us, is being trafficked, is being used. You know, we go to the supermarket, you know, whatever, we go out and there's so many things around us that's going on, and we are so totally oblivious to it, unaware. You know, so the more education we can get, you know, it will help us to help others, because that's what we're really here to do, to help each others. You know, as we talk about love, this is part of what love is all about, to be able to help each other, you know, because we would want the same thing for ourselves. All right, so Caverna said she's starting AY at 6:30. So I will play some songs until then.
How much time we have?
About 20 minutes.
We have conversations.
Okay. All right. So throw it out there. You know, conversations.
Well, for example, for me, Elder, I think as part of the community services, one of the things that we can do is to share the resources that she just pointed out. Like, I'm a fan of Publix. I had no idea about what she just shared. And so indirectly, I am supporting something that I am against because we don't have the knowledge. So I think I guess I have to get permission that these are things we need to be sharing with our church community. If we're going to become the watchman on the wall of Zion, talking out against injustice, we have to be in the know. We have to know what's going on, and we have to be willing to share that information so that our people can really take on their role as being the watchman. So.
Ooh, again, you know, knowledge is so powerful. She talks about just one, you know, we're live on YouTube, so I just want to be cognizant, you know, of what is it that we say. But there are other people, other business ventures that's doing the same thing. You know, bigger multi-billion-dollar companies that I know about that's doing. And when I first heard the information, I was like, wow. And I go to this place, you could say, every other day. Every other day we go in the store, and because their items are cheap, we buy it. But guess what? They're also using cheap labor. I don't know if you remember the days when they in Jamaica, they had a thing called free zone. I don't know if you remember it, right? And the highway down by the what was that street called?
Marcus Garvey Drive.
Marcus Garvey Drive, yes. You know, the young ladies, you know, they'll go there and they weren't getting paid any money or barely minimum wage, and they work for hours, right? But somebody was benefit, but it wasn't our country. You know, it wasn't our workers. You know, so this is not just an American thing. This is a worldwide thing. You know, the same thing happens in India, Thailand, Brazil. You know, they traffic people. They pick them up on the street. They might put them on a car and take them way out in the Amazon jungle to do coal. I don't know if you know how important it is. Coal is like gold. You know, for some people, you know, they cut down all these trees, but they need people to do it. So they traffic them and they take them. And at the same time, instead of just trafficking the male to do the work, they traffic the females. They take the female and put them into sex slave, you know, and again, it's a huge multi-million-dollar business, multi-million-dollar business, but we are so unaware of what's going on around us.
Sir, when I just came to this country, this is Nassim. I remember I was working on Sample Road, waiting on the bus one evening to go home, to go further up on Sample. And I saw this red car came up behind me, and it was a white woman. And she said to me, "I can take you home." And I said, "What? Do you know me?" And she said, "Are you waiting on the bus?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I can take you home." And I said, "No, I will wait on the bus because I don't know you." And it's like she turned red and she sped off. And I watched the car went up on Sample, but